In this exciting episode, you might want to put on your glasses, then take them off, then put them on again, then take them off for good measure. You know, anything you can do to emotionally identify with, gulp, a district attorney. It's Season 2, Episode 16 of Perry Mason, The Case of the Fraudulent Photo. Welcome to the Perry Pod. I'm your humble host, Jonathan Searcy, and my purpose here is pretty simple: provide an audio companion to the greatest legal drama in television history, Perry Mason. I plan to do a pod for every episode of the television series, and as time permits, I'll look at some of those made-for-TV movies too. I'll be working through the series in the order in which the episodes were aired. Each episode I'll give a brief refresher on the plot, and if the episode was based on a novel, I'll compare the book with its television adaptation. Next, I'll list some key pieces of trivia, as well as tackle the episode's main theme. We'll feature a Perry proverb, a moment of wisdom from the man himself, and then we'll finish with a post-case water cooler, where just like Perry, Adella, and Paul, we can rehash the ins and outs of their adventures. But first, to the law library! This episode in the law library, we encounter a little legal loophole called res gestae.
The witness can testify to the entire conversation if he wishes.
That'll be hearsay, Mr. Mason.
The defense considers it part of the res gestae.
Okay, so you know hearsay is inadmissible as evidence. Trag can't admit, let's say, as evidence, a rumor that he heard from Hamilton Berger concerning the moral character of a defendant. D.A. Berger told me that Brander Harris's glasses don't even have real lenses in them. They're fakes. Unless you can substantiate the rumor with evidence, it's hearsay. That is, unless Trag saw Berger going after Harris, even though Trag told him the most likely culprit was, say, Leora Matthews. Berger's statement about Brander Harris's lenses alone cannot be admitted in testimony. Well, res gestae, which is Latin for things done, allows a judge to rule that certain statements are so spontaneous and pertinent that they truly reflect the state of mind of a person, so that they can be admitted as evidence, even though on their face the words traffic in rumors. So I could admit Trag's statement that I just gave you under res gestae if I were, say, holding a disbarment proceeding against Hamilton Berger for prosecutorial misconduct, and pointed out that when Trag presented Berger with evidence for Leora Matthews being the prime suspect, Berger moved ahead against Harris while uttering the rumor about his fake lenses. Of course, Perry uses the res gestae loophole to his advantage at precisely the point Berger expects him to object to hearsay. Perry knows that Jimmy Castleton is involved with the crime somehow. He gives Berger the necessary rope by waiving his objection to hearsay. Old Jimmy gets tangled in it, and Perry rides that res gestae horse to the murderer's stall. Small note, you can no longer use res gestae to admit hearsay. So Perry is capturing, in this case, a now shelved legal practice. So much for precedents. Now, let's get to the plot of this episode. The Case of the Fraudulent Photo. Young, career-minded Brander Harris is the youngest DA in the history of Waring County. That's saying something, since Waring County doesn't actually exist, except for in this episode. Harris is hot on the trail of the men who engineered a hospital graft, and his informant, a secretary named Leora Matthews.
Just so I'm not making a mistake, Miss Matthews, you are the county auditor's secretary.
And you're district attorney of Waring County. Where do we go from there?
Well, on the phone you told me you had some information on the Northport hospital graft.
What's in it for me?
Well, I have no money to pay you. It's a matter of civic duty.
Civic duty, my eye. You can make a career out of this. I can make enemies.
But Matthews has the drop on the naive Harris. She makes it look like the pair are lovebirds, gets their kiss captured on camera, and then has Harris knocked out for good measure. Next thing we know, Matthews is talking to some political mover and shaker named Marshall Scott and laughing about it. Brander Harris is in some she restaurant getting asked about said photograph by Mr. Blake.
I understand you're making an investigation into the Northport Hospital project.
That's right, for the Waring County Grand Jury. You know, I'm tremendously flattered, Mr. Blake. You're a very busy man. A behind-the-scenes power in politics and industry in this state. Principal stockholder in the Century Newspaper Alliance. And here you come to me. I think I know why.
After the requisite exposition, I know all about you, Mr. Blake. Biographical detail, biographical detail, biographical detail. I similarly know about you, D.A. Harris. Biographical detail, etc. We get to the heart of the matter. Harris is gunning for the man that Cleveland Blake is grooming to take over his place as California's preeminent political handyman, Jimmy Castleton. Fortunately, Harris bumps into Perry and Adella as he's leaving the restaurant, and now Perry finds himself helping a DA.
You understand what publication of this photograph can do to your personal and political life?
Oh, it's just a smear tactic.
Smear tactics can be very effective at times, especially against young career-minded district attorneys.
Perry and Paul run an effective sting on Leora Matthews, accompanied by Les Brown and his band of renown. That's one crowded lobby. Perry puts the screws to Matthews, who promptly calls Marshall Scott, but Paul can't get the number in its entirety. You know where this is headed. Scott's going to end up dead. Harris was going to be there, and he's the one who gets arrested for the crime. Hamilton Berger, he's getting pretty high and mighty about the case.
But what can I do? He killed Marshall Scott in this county, and I've got to prosecute.
He didn't kill him.
Don't bet on it.
Ham, take it from me. You've done far more to besmirch the good name of district attorneys everywhere than old Brander Harris has ever done. Simmer down a little bit, champ. Before we get to the murder trial, Perry gets to play prosecutor, conducting Brander Harris's case before the grand jury, while BH cools his heels behind bars. It seems that some political operatives made sure that contractors would have to pay top dollar in order to get building contracts, say on hospitals, but that left builders in the unenviable position of cutting costs on materials to just break even. As a result, shoddy work all around. First, Perry gets the inspector to sing like a canary.
Only one truckload of steel cable was delivered to the job, Mr. Mason. That truck couldn't possibly carry 6.5 tons. It's a relief. It's a relief to get it off my chest.
Then there's the county auditor. Then there's the man who made the bid for the hospital, George Fairbanks. Only he gives Perry a little more than he bargained for.
Did he ever tell you who any of these higher-ups were?
You only mentioned one name.
What name, Mr. Fairbanks?
Brander Harris.
I guess we'll have to sort it out in the murder trial. Back as a defense attorney, Perry runs through the possible suspects. There's Mrs. Scott, Marshall's wife, who fabricated her alibi.
Mr. Mason, I lied about the flat tire.
Mother, don't!
There's Jimmy Castleton, the man who was responsible for the hospital graft, and the man who Brander Harris was gunning for.
I confess to being the principal party in the payoff of the Northport graft.
But neither of them are the murderers. The murderer is the dapper Mr. Fix-It Cleveland Blake, the string puller who felt betrayed by Marshall Scott's double cross.
Do you want me to take the blame for that, too?
No. No, Jimmy. I guess nobody can fill my shoes this time.
What's going to happen with the hospital? Don't know. Meanwhile, Perry's dining out on Brander's dime. Now, let's get trivial, shall we? Each episode, I give you a Paul, Adella, and a Perry. A Paul is a subject worth investigating more. Adella is an actor or actress from the episode that we get to know a little bit better. And a Perry is something we learn about our intrepid hero. Our Paul for this episode involves the central plot conceit that political graft within local communities was compromising the quality of public buildings like schools and hospitals.
What about grade B concrete blocks at grade A prices? And second quality plumbing supplies at premium cost?
Was this a thing in 1950s America? Waring County is a made-up county. Our Paul prompt from this episode is this corruption made up too, or was it ripped from 1959 headlines? Our Adella for this episode is the man, the myth, the legend, Hugh Marlowe, a.k.a. Brander Harris.
You know, I don't know how I was going to conduct that hearing. I haven't the slightest idea how you will.
Marlowe was born in Philly, PA in 1911. His birth name, Hugh Hipple. He got his start in radio, where he announced for Des Moines radio powerhouse WHO. And when Marlowe left to head west to Hollywood, his replacement was a man by the name of Ronald Reagan. Hugh cut his teeth, his acting teeth that is, at the Pasadena Playhouse, the acting joint we've discussed many times on this podcast. This is the same theater where Raymond Burr really got his start. And Hugh went from Broadway to radio to Hollywood. In the 1950s, he was connected to 20th Century Fox, and he appeared in a bunch of famous movies. The one I know him best from is the 1950 classic All About Eve, and he starred in 6 different Perry Mason episodes, this being his first, so we'll see him again. He married 3 times. He died in 1982. Reflecting on Marlowe's career, writer and director Joseph Mankiewicz, who's responsible for All About Eve, called him a grunt and assessed Marlowe's range thusly, quote, "He was a stick," end quote. Ouch. I.e., Marlowe was so lifeless, he wasn't even a legit piece of wood. He was a stick. Brutal. Well, the man knew his way around a pair of horn rims, and for the role of stuffed-shirted, career-minded young district attorney Brander Harris, I think Marlowe was magnificent. The Perry for this episode involves cash. Apparently, the going rate for retainers is...
I'll send you a retainer. $500, all right?
Sure.
because that's what Harris offers to pay Perry. I guess he would know, being a legal professional on the other side of the aisle and all. Now, what does Harris do for a fee? He picks up Perry and Adella's check.
Well, premeditation or no, I don't know how I can ever repay you.
Man, the food at that joint must be good. That's the second time he's eaten there in the episode. It's all the way out in Waring. Man, you've done some good legal work, Perry. Enjoy that chow. The theme for this episode is politics. At the center of the episode is the relationship between Cleveland Blake and Jimmy Castleton. Early in the episode, Cleveland Blake lets us know just how much he thinks of Jimmy Castleton's talent.
I don't deny that I've had an eye on Jimmy Castleton. I'm proud to have him working for me. He makes most other men his age look like Lilliputians.
That's a mighty nice literary allusion there, Cleveland. If you remember Gulliver's Travels, you know that the central dispute in the first Gulliver voyage, the one that features the Lilliputians, is political. There are two warring kingdoms of 6-inch people, the kingdoms of Blefuscu and Lilliput, who are each fighting over which end of an egg is most proper to crack. That's right, their external dispute is every bit as small-minded as they literally are. Gulliver inevitably gets drawn into the fray, just like our man Jimmy Castleton. So, it was more fitting than Cleveland Blake even knew. Now, this is one of the first episodes where the writers admit into the plot the political machinations of the district attorney's office. We never have a sense in seasons 1 and 2 that Hamilton's career is on the line, even as he's fumbling away case after case. But in this episode, we see a district attorney take on very real corruption and encounter foes who are willing to play dirty to keep their power. Accordingly, the episode's view of politics is pretty cynical. The law as practiced by the DA, well, it's helpless to stop this corruption. It takes our man Perry becoming a DA for a time to put things right. Brander Harris himself admits he doesn't know how he's going to put on the case that he's trying to mount. The best offense, i.e. prosecutor, is a great defense, i.e. a defense attorney. That goes for unearthing political corruption or solving a murder case. As for the optics of this little episode for district attorneys everywhere, well, that takes us to our Perry proverb. I think it's Perry who makes other men look like Lilliputians, don't you? In this episode's Perry proverb, Hamilton Berger is perplexed.
Perry, I've got enough problems of my own without you adding any.
He's convinced a DA is guilty of murder in his county. Never mind the fact that Berger has been cavalierly putting perfectly innocent defendants in potential death penalty trials. Well, Perry's equally skeptical and lets Berger have it.
Kind of smirches the name of district attorney, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Embarrasses me. Puts me in the position of having to pull your chestnuts out of the fire.
Chestnuts! Fire! That's right, Ham. You just got roasted. Now, let's grab a swig from the water cooler, shall we?
No, there is one thing I don't understand.
Go on, Paul.
Our Paul prompt from the previous episode involved the meaning of two idiomatic phrases that got used in the case of the Footloose doll. One came from Bob Wallace.
Our little romance is finished, Millie, and it's devil take the hindmost.
One came from Carl Davis.
Don't now Carl me. I'm fed to the teeth.
We had a few people write in with the answers. April, Aunt Myra, my father. The devil take the hindmost. Basically means every man for himself, i.e., the devil gets the leftovers. First come, first served. I'm going to worry about me. Who cares about you? And our second one, fed to the teeth, means fed up or filled, normal room for food, or in Carl Davis's case, his wife's nagging. Fun times. I wonder if you'll be using those phrases anytime soon. A note about the case of the glittering goldfish with its allusion to Omar Khayyam. My dad wants to note that there is another classic TV connection to the Ruby Yacht of Omar Khayyam that I omitted. There is a Rocky and Bullwinkle episode where the pair find a ruby red yacht that belongs to someone named Omar Khayyam, and it leads to this awful pun.
If it's made out of rubies, then this must be the ruby yacht of Omar Khayyam.
The word ruby yacht is Persian for quatrains, i.e. the title is The Poetry of Omar Khayyam. Ruby yacht are not two separate words. Like there in Rocky and Bullwinkle. Go check it out. You can find it on YouTube. As always, I'd love feedback about this particular episode of the podcast in general. Was there something about this episode you'd like to comment on? Something you'd like to correct? You can email me at theperrypod@gmail.com, and you'll find that link in the show notes. All Perry Pod episodes are available via Spotify, YouTube, and iTunes. Thanks again for joining me on this pod journey. On our next episode, Bob Wallace is back. This time he's named Stacy Chandler. But it's like Bob's bad rep came with him. See if he can emerge from that reputation unscathed in the case of the romantic rogue. Join us, won't you? Until then, this is Jonathan Searcy saying, keep on walking that Park Avenue beat.